library studio here of the Yahowah blog. I'm Craig Winn, and this is Qara, which is looks like I shrunk the Wookiee for those of you who are regular listeners. My pleasure to be with you. We're going to resume our program on Gabor, and Miss Qara wants to be known as a Gabora. She is a real tenacious little puppy. So it is my pleasure to resume where we took off in our last program. We are resuming with the 33rd Mizmowr. Come to find out, it really is an extraordinary... Excuse me there, kid. Let's stay here on the set, okay? There we go. Let's not go over there. Thank you. Good girl. It is an extraordinary ride through the mind of Dowd as he explains what he represents not only to Yahowah, but how the various pieces of this puzzle, this portrait that he is painting on behalf of his father, Yahowah, will fall into place as we enter the last days. And it is a real pleasure to follow his thought process through the 33rd, 34th, and 35th Mizmowr. I was thinking today, Rich and I, Rich is over at my far right here, as he is the master of the cables for these programs. And during lunch today, we talked about that with the onset of AI and the dereliction of thinking now among people, preferring to outsource that whole process of being discerning and being judgmental, acting in an intelligent way. This will be the last great essay ever written about God. And it is the first time that an comprehensive analysis of who Yahowah is and what he is offering, what he expects in return, first time that we have seen such a thing now in what is 25 centuries, and maybe even longer than that. Moshe in Devarim created a very astute portrait of who God is, what he's offering and expecting in return. And we see the same thing later when Dowd writes the Mizmowr, which are the Psalms, and also, excuse me there, kid, we're going to need that for the program, really. Yeah, for the teleprompter. When Dowd wrote the Mizmowr lyrics for his songs and the Mashal word pictures, he, of course, painted the most vivid and revealing prophetic portrayal of Yahowah ever written. The next great intellectual expose on God would be ascribed by Yasha, the thinking man's prophet, who covered really the whole landscape of the Jewish experience from the rebellious religious days all the way to Yahowah's ultimate and triumphant return with his beloved son Dowd. But in the intervening period, with the exception of some really awesome notes by some of the prophets, who mostly just revealed what Yahowah had to say and didn't elaborate much on their own, we've gone a very long time, certainly every bit of 25 centuries, since there was a comprehensive expose on who God is and what he is offering. And I am quite certain there will never be another after this one. When you think about it, we went right to the basics. We searched for the oldest extant manuscripts of Yahowah's testimony, typically the Dead Sea Scrolls, and using the Masoretic text only when there wasn't a reference in the Dead Sea Scrolls. We then stripped every word of the diacritical markings that were created in the 12th century by Masoretes to cause the text to read as they wanted it to, literally changing the words by adding nonsensical diacritical markings, as if the 22 letters in the Hebrew alphabet were without vowels, when in fact there are 5 vowels and 17 consonants. And then to create an entirely new format of conveying God's message in the lingua franca of the day, the most intellectual language probably ever conceived in English, and the language spoken by more Jews and by more people worldwide than any other by a wide margin, in a novel fashion, in an amplified fashion, where the text itself is presented in a bold font, where the Hebrew words in their most generic form are put within the parenthetical, so that no matter what we're conveying to you for the first time ever, you not only have a far more comprehensive picture of what the words mean, but you have, for the first time ever, the means to validate and verify these translations for yourself. It's why it's just so exceedingly odd for the unthinking of the artificial intelligence, these chat bots, to make the claim that we are assigning our own definitions to words, when in fact I have the most accurate and comprehensive definitions of the word that is possible, and that the very means to validate every translation is, and every word is contained in the translations themselves, something that has never been done previously. And then a more comprehensive explanation of that phrase within the parenthetical. And if it's a verb, we very often present the stems, the moods, the conjugations, so that you have a better ability to understand them. For example, we're going to render Shagar in this next statement in Psalm 33:14. And it means that he looks intently, he observes and examines. It was written in the Hiphil stem, which means that the subject, this would be God himself, being he, is influencing the object, which are those who are inhabiting the land, in a way that the intent is for those inhabiting the land to be more like God himself. And the perfect conjugation that says that he's not doing this all the time. He is doing it intermittently. And we should never get the perception that God is preoccupied with humanity, particularly in this phase where most people are so religious and political and therefore opposed to him. And then this was written in the third person masculine singular, which is important because every reference to Yahweh is masculine singular. But no one had ever done that before, so that you would understand exactly what is being conveyed. Puppies have short attention spans, as you can see. And then beyond all of that, the commentary and the translation. So here you have an innovative, amplified translation that is the first ever that is written based upon the oldest extant documents, scrubbed of all religious diacritical markings, and that one that is based upon examining the root of every word, the actionable root, and all cognates of these words to make certain that we have them rendered as precisely as is absolutely possible. And then we take that and we augment it with commentary so that you would understand to the greatest extent possible what God is saying, conveyed by someone who has done this for the past 24 years, 6 and 7 days a week, 10, 12, 14 hours a day, and who has been inspired literally by the spirits of Yahweh to get this done. That has heretofore never been done before. And then along with that, because of this gift of making the connections necessary to understand the ultimate value of intellect, and the very thing that seems to be no capacity for in AI, is discerning what is right and wrong, appropriate and inappropriate, and then drawing from related texts insights that take us from knowing to understanding, which is exceedingly rare. And that is way beyond the capacity of most people. It is certainly beyond the capacity of scholars. Scholars are people who know a great deal and understand almost nothing. And it is way beyond the capacity of the AI engines. So here we are with something extraordinarily unique, focused on the single most important subject in the universe: who God is, what he's offering, and what he expects in return. This is the last time that something like this will be composed. I'm here surrounded by two of the more recently published books, An Introduction to God, Volume 1, and Eye of Yahowah, Eth Sarah, The Time of Troubles, which is Volume 9 of that series. 35 volumes, some 25,000 pages, all there, offered freely at yadayah.com. No one's ever done that before. And we also have the issue that the reason that no one has attempted to do what I have done over the past 25 centuries is that Christianity has so muddied the water, as then has Islam and Judaism, creating this tremendous barrier to understanding. And they've done that by having men speak over God. And when you have religions which are, the most popular things within cultures and societies, becoming dominant within those cultures and societies, there is this misconception, and one that is unfortunately reiterated by AI routinely, that which is popular must be true, when there is no, and never has been, a correlation between popular and truth. That they are usually the inverse of one another. And so this is an exceedingly unique situation where I removed the rubbish. I wrote 5 volumes regarding Christianity to prove emphatically that the Christian New Testament is rubbish. Now, that would eliminate some 90% of the so-called biblical scholars, because I have proven emphatically, overwhelmingly, that the text that they have based their reputations on and that they serve is faulty. So their perspective as they look at the words of God and reflected in the Torah, prophets, and Psalms are automatically jaundiced by this pile of lies, and this series of 5 volumes removes them. And it removes them in a way that's irrefutable. I simply juxtapose Yahweh's testimony next to that of the authors of the Christian New Testament, and they're in conflict 100% of the time. And beyond all of that, would also write 5 volumes in opposition to the notion that Muhammad was a prophet or that Allah is a God, and that I prove that the Quran is by far and by any standard the worst book ever written. Again, clearing up misconceptions that there is such a thing as an Abrahamic religion and that we all worship the same God. I have to reduce those lies to rubble to even begin the process of analyzing and conveying what God had to say. And beyond all of that, I've even looked at the text of those books that are considered canonized in the quote-unquote Old Testament of the Bible, recognizing that God never uses the term Old Testament. That's anathema to him. And he would never, ever use the term Bible, because it's based on Babel, which means to confound and confused. So when you look at what God said, particularly in Devarim, twice, on giving us instructions as to how to determine whether or not a text, a book, or any prophetic claim was from him or not, we find that there are many books that are canonized within this Old Testament of the Bible are as faulty as the concept of Old Testament and Bible, including Job, including the book of Ezekiel, including Ecclesiastes, the Song of Solomon, Esther, are all examples of this. Jonah, another example. They're absolutely false. And since God gave us the means to prove them so, I've done so. And in so doing, you also clear the way to present the truth polluted, if you will, by Judaism, which I also refute. And if you're listening to this program, you need to know there's nothing like this ever. Because even with the profound insights that are provided by Dowd, David, by Moshe before him, and by Yasha after them, there is no attempt by any of them to expose and condemn the most popular religions of the day, such as Christianity with 2.5 billion followers, that I absolutely destroy in a manner that can't be refuted. Other than to say, well, most people disagree with him, so therefore he must not be telling the truth. It's, this is intelligence by artificial intelligence that literally can't think. It doesn't matter how effectively you make the case. They're simply programmed to regurgitate that which is the most popular. That's what they do. And so even the three great minds that I have shared didn't do exposés negating and proving that Allah is not God and that Muhammad was not a prophet, that Paul lied and was demon-possessed, and that the Christian New Testament contradicts Yahweh and his Torah and prophets throughout, or that there are many books that are included in what's called the Old Testament of the Bible that don't belong. You have never witnessed that previously, and you will never see it again. And it can't even be done today. This is the last bastion of human intelligence brought to the topic of who God is, what he's offering, and what is expected in return. Even those that I trained to be able to translate and then to think like God, such that they could deduce relevant and accurate insights, have no capacity to do so, and just wallow in all manner of absurd opinions. So this is a very unique situation. If you benefit from it, you will be among the few. If you act upon it, you'll be essentially one in a million. And you will have to exercise something that is very quickly departing from the human experience. Actual intelligence, mental acumen, discipline, being discerning and discriminating, deducing the difference between fact and fiction, right and wrong, good and bad. So it's an extraordinary situation. I hope you capitalize upon it. As I say, it's the first attempt in 25 centuries, and it will be humankind's last endeavor on this journey. Out of the place to ponder what has been firmly established, min mokon, out of the sight and space-time as the location and foundation for everything which was set up. From this dwelling place, Yasha, he looks intently upon all of those inhabiting the land. Song, Mizmowr 33:14. Now, it should be noted, and I'm always eager to share insights that will help you understand my thought process in rendering not only the translation, but also in conveying the intent of the writer. And here it should be noted that I translated this verse assuming that Dowd was still speaking of Yahowah, looking on from the spiritual realm as we transition from the 13th to the 14th refrains of his song. But since the previous statement concluded with a reference to the offspring of a particular man, it could be an affirmation that God will establish his Nakri, observant foreigner, in a dwelling ideally suited to examine his testimony, to learn and then to share it. And if a master of the cables is occasionally showing you the great outdoors to my left, you will have an appreciation of the fact that we are indeed positioned in an ideal environment to focus all of our energies onto understanding the words of our God and conveying them intelligently. It has never been a better situation to write, to think, and to share without interruption. So Yahowah, in this way, could well be still revealing that this goy, to reach his people while caring for their needs, is in a place such that he is as effective as possible, accomplishing what God wants done. In other words, God's delegating this responsibility, as he always does. Boy, as I've gone back for, I don't know, probably the 10th time, presenting the 89th Mizmowr, and I'm doing so because I've decided that I would introduce Bashar Herald first with Moshe's presentation of Dowd in the 18th chapter, and then following that with Yahowah's presentation of Dowd in the 89th Mizmowr. And when we read it, it is absolutely undeniable that Yahowah chose to cut the covenant with and through Dowd, and that everything that has been achieved that is of value to us has been a collaboration with Dowd serving as Yahowah's co-worker. And so the other day when I expressed my disdain for those who were claiming that God alone saves in the sense that he didn't need to work through someone like Dowd, you really need to change your attitude, because it is grossly in opposition to God. And this is over and over the message of the 89th Mizmowr. It's a combination of that, and that just as God has chosen to delegate through his co-worker and to collaborate with the Dowd, Dowd too will delegate as he collaborates with his right arm. Dowd is Yahowah's right arm at his right side, and Yada serves Dowd in the same way. In the end, God, of course, wants his people to be of like mind. When this occurs and they come together and return to him, well, he will reciprocate. And this is the intent of Teruah, leading to Kippurim on behalf of Sukkah. The 33rd Mizmowr reads, "He's the one who fashioned and formed their heart and mind to be together at the same time, united and joined as one. He's the one who makes the connections to understand something about their every endeavor." God gave us the ability to comprehend his nature and our world by using our Nesama. It's our conscience. And then he provided his Torah instructions and Nabi revelations so that we would have sufficient evidence to process and grasp what he is offering and expecting in return. Now, in this regard, having listened to the rabbis rabble on, one of the things that they do is they constantly corrupt God's terms. They want to pretend that their nephesh soul has a divine aspect and unites them with God. And it doesn't. All animals have souls, and a soul doesn't unite you in any way, shape, or form with God. Your soul is the reservoir of who you are. It embodies your aptitudes, attitudes, and character, as well as the full reservoir of your experiences. But it's our Nesama that connects us with God. Our Nesama is our conscience, the ability for us to think, for us to exercise good judgment, for us to understand the difference, for example, between a nephesh soul and a ruach spirit. Yahweh has a ruach spirit. He also has a nephesh soul. He communicates with us through his ruach and through his word. So these are just important things for us to understand if we're going to appreciate who God is. Now, that notwithstanding, it would be out of character for Yahweh to endure witnessing every human endeavor. Would drive him crazy. And so the job of investigating and excoriating the most egregious crimes, and especially the formation and promulgation of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, conspiracy, and anti-Semitism, is going to be assigned to the most uncompromising of God's children. And therefore, to a significant extent, the results of this collaboration are found, well, in Babel, Twistianity, and goddamn religion, where I excoriate them. Now, in these next statements, Ein, which typically serves as a form of negation, is used to introduce our king rather than to negate the verb, which is Yasha, salvation. Therefore, the most rational option is to introduce the narrative using the interrogatory potential of Ein, which would therefore ask, did not, has not, or will not. This being the case, Dowd as the king is encouraging us to ponder the fact that our salvation was a collaborative effort, and that it took considerable courage and strength for him to play his part. Even with God doing most of the work, this was a tough duty. Also interesting, as we make our way through this trilogy of pronouncements on salvation, we find Dowd, our Savior, using three different Hebrew words to convey deliverance: Yasha, Natsal, and Tashua. Excuse me. We have a young dog that I think is chewing on cardboard and not a cable, but I guess if she gets the cable, we'll find out soon enough, won't we? And collectively, I suspect that the resulting implications are prophetic. In particular, Yasha, the first three of these, is the result of recognizing and accepting what Dowd and Yahweh achieved by fulfilling Pesach, Matsah, and Bakudim. Therefore, it is not politics, religion, or patriotism that will save. And this is a lesson most Jews and the world at large needs to learn if we're going to have a relationship with God Almighty. So I'm rendering Ein as I had disclosed. Did not the king prevail and deliver salvation through tremendous strength and an abundance of power, showing the ability to endure the anguishing travail? He wrote in first person that he'd be crucified. There is no more painful way to die. Of course, it was his body that suffered, but his soul would suffer too, because his soul would carry our guilt into Sheol. He endured hell to perfect us. So indeed, did not the king prevail and deliver salvation, Yasha, through tremendous strength and an abundance of power, showing the ability to endure the anguishing travail. Which brings us to the word of the show, Gabor. This mighty, courageous, capable, and confident man does not deliver salvation, nor is he spared and drawn out by his considerable qualifications, capabilities, or strength, even his steadfast endurance. Oh, wait a minute. Is that a conflict? Or is God, our Dowd, actually saying, no, not conflict, collaboration? So he's saying, yep, it took big time, strength, power, ability, and this fortitude to endure the travail of fulfilling Pesach and Matsah. And even though there is no one more Gabor than Dowd, mighty, courageous, capable, or confident, he did not deliver salvation on his own, not even considering that his qualifications were more considerable than anyone else who has ever lived. It's the Son of God. He's the Messiah. He's the former and returning king. He's the chosen one. He's the shepherd. He is a Nabi, prophet. I don't get any more qualified. He is the main branch. He's Sadak, right. He fought constantly, 66 battles to defend Israel, won all of them. He's articulate. He wrote most of the Mizmowr, Psalms, and most all of the Mashal, word pictures, Proverbs. So even considering that he is the most courageous, capable, and confident of men, he does not deliver salvation or spare by his own considerable qualifications, capabilities, or strengths, even his steadfast endurance. No, it is a collaboration. It is just a gruesome way to die by being crucified, unless that crucifixion on Passover is orchestrated by God so that Dowd's Bashar body represents the Lamb, and that God provides the benefits of the covenant of prolonged life based upon the doorway to life being opened by Dowd. And Dowd can't carry our guilt with his soul into Sheol, never to be seen again, unless Yahweh is orchestrating the entire process. So the proper perspective on Dowd's fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bekorim is conveyed in this pronouncement, offering his body up to the brutality of crucifixion to extend our existence, while agreeing to carry our guilt into Sheol to perfect us, took more strength and conviction than we can fathom, and that any one of us could possibly muster. And yet, with all of the strength and fortitude Dowd had to offer, even as the ultimate Gabor, courageous and combative man, with the most glorious resume in human history, he alone was not nearly enough to endure the anguish of this travail. Saving us would require the best of man, along with a mighty assist from God. They fulfilled Chag Matsah together. This remarkable man, our Messiah and King, would have to be exceptionally Gabor, brave and bold, courageous and capable, even to contemplate such an ordeal, much less endure it. And yet he knew it would be beneficial to many, saving us from ourselves, and that it would make his Father exceedingly proud. Therefore, the fulfillment of Chag Matsah, as will be the case with Chag Sukkah, will be the ultimate collaboration between God and man. Now, there is more to this particular story, that Yahweh wants us to understand. The misguided and religious want to project a false notion that men and women should be humble, mild-mannered, subdued, and meek around God to garner his support when the opposite is true. I mean, Dowd began by saying, I had to be unbelievably tough to get this done. And even though I was as Gabor as there will ever be, I didn't do this alone. But he didn't do it by being wimpy, by being meek, by being humble. He did it by being Gabor. And Yahweh saw this man who was resolute and tough enough for him to work with. And that's how they got it done. Exactly the opposite of the really weak and meek religious peoples out there. That's why they have an affinity for their mommy god, because they don't appreciate Yahweh's affection for those who are tough, resilient. Supreme confidence and courage is ubiquitous among the men of Yahweh's choosing. Both are baseline requirements to prevail throughout the storms that always build around those who speak for God by condemning the religious while advancing Yahweh's message. Therefore, not only does Yahweh uphold his preferences for Gabor, confident and courageous, there is no Hebrew word for humble or meek. Apart from addressing those God is deliberately subduing in opposition to him. And while anah, with a wah at the end, is commonly, albeit errantly, rendered humble, it is from the verbal root anah, with the hey at the end, which actually means responsive. Why in the most cited prophecy regarding the Messiah, Isaiah 9, is Dowd called Gabor if God prefers wimps? Why in Yahweh's ode to his beloved son is the Messiah and King called Gabor if Yahweh wants humble? Do you think that God could have achieved the fulfillment of Pesach, Matsah, and Bakorim with a humble wimp? No possibility whatsoever. But more than this, wouldn't it be counterproductive and in opposition to the covenant for a vastly superior being to want a tremendously inferior being to be humbled all the more in his presence? God's entire purpose is to do just the opposite, to raise us up, not push us further down. Think it through. Why does God encourage us to approach the presence of the fire during these invitations to meet with him? Isn't it because the fire transforms decaying organic material, bodies, if you will, into energy and light that is more empowered and rises up to the heavens? Well, this juxtaposition of being both resolute and reliant is the point of the previous narrative. Dowd was as bold as any man, and yet he prevailed because of what Yahweh achieved through him. But since God wasn't pulling the strings of a puppet, he needed a man who was up to the task, one as much of an equal as any man who has ever lived. Do you know that in the 89th Mizmowr, God actually declares that Dowd is his equivalent in the material realm, that he is his counterpart, that in Dowd you see God more clearly than in any other human manifestation. That's pretty extraordinary, isn't it? And Dowd is never once called meek, but he is often called Gabor, strong and courageous. In fact, the very few times that Dowd showed that his emotions got the best of him and that he was not as strong or as rational as he should have been, we find both God and man correcting the king. So this juxtaposition of being both resolute and reliant, it's the whole point of what God's trying to say. Now, I understand that those who have failed to accomplish anything of merit in their lives and who are jealous of what others have built and achieved view confidence as arrogance. But in fact, arrogance masks insecurity, while confidence is the result of having a sober assessment of one's limitations by having stumbled in the process of achieving something. In fact, not only does confidence come from righting wrongs while turning obstacles into opportunities, the resulting confidence becomes more enabling as it serves as a conduit for understanding. It is required to document 10,000 unheralded insights and conclusions in 35 books, and then publish them openly and subject them to criticism, and to turning on the lights and the camera during live streams on something as vital, as exacting, as expansive and expressive as Yahweh's preferences and plans. Confidence is the currency of the Yahweh vlog. Yahweh would have it no other way. This note: we can be assured that Yahweh examined Dowd's soul before choosing him. That's really the very possibility, since we have no knowledge whatsoever of Dowd's inception. That Dowd is a soul that Yahweh may have known before the universe was created. It's interesting that Dowd is the man without a mother. Never mentioned, says nothing. There is no reference to her of any kind. And he was a man without much of a father. Yasha was a jerk. Dowd was in Bethlehem because of a fractured family. Now, I want to speak a little bit about that because I do reference this fracture in what was a covenant family that transpired a year ago at this time. And I want to actually thank them for being so belligerent, because without them doing so, two things would have been very different. You know, if you look at the life of Abraham, he had a fractured family. It was a horrible rift with Hagar and Ishmael, and between Sarah and Yishak, even with Lot, who turned out to be a real scallywag. Then you look at Jacob and the infighting between his wives and the horrible state of what happened amongst his sons. You even look at how before him, Yishak was played by his wife, such that he was tricked into blessing the second rather than the firstborn son. And you turn to Moshe, and he was constantly assailed by the stupidity of Aaron and the arrogance of Miriam, his brother and sister. He had the entire family of the children of Israel at his throat, wanted to stone him. You turn to Dowd, His king and people turned against him. His wife assailed him. His own son led a coup against him. And you ponder all of this and you say, why? Why? These are the exemplars in telling God's story. Why would they all suffer from a fractured family? Isn't the whole purpose of the covenant to have a unified and loving family? And with every one of these people, we have a fractured family, and it's an embittering situation. Indeed. And yes. So why? Do you know? It's worth contemplating. I do know the answer. Going all the way back to the garden, when Adam and Chawah sided against God, and he had the first rift in his family. God has known very little but belligerence, embittered rebellion from humankind. The people he has tried to nurture, to teach, to lead, to empower, to enrich, have spit in his face. Now, no time was it worse than during the Exodus, where the entire time the children of Israel were belligerent towards God, told him to shut up and go away. And so if someone is going to speak for God, and there have been some 20 men in particular that have done so vociferously, they must have empathy for what God has endured. They must, as was the case with Hosea when Yahweh asked him to marry a religious whore, have an appreciation of what God has had to endure from his people. How else do you speak for God and show any empathy for what he has had to endure with his wayward children, his broken family? The covenant has been broken from almost the moment it was created. And so if you're going to speak for God, you're going to have experienced that. And so without this shattering of the covenant, with the belligerence that became so obnoxious to me, I would not have known that. I would not have had that same empathy. And at the same token, without the embittered nature of their ongoing attempts to discredit me and to devalue this whole library of books of Yahowah, and their result, which is to bring Yahweh's name back to his people and reacquaint them with their Messiah and Savior. Without that attack, I would never have been drawn back to the Torah in such a way that I came to understand that far more than a historic narrative, it's prophetic. It speaks directly of our time. Numbers 5, Numbers 11, 12, 13, 14, especially 15, 19, 20, all of it speaks specifically of us and our time. Debating 29 with the arrival of the Nakri. Genesis 1 with the greater and lesser luminaries. Numbers 11 with the arrival of Eldod and Midod. Samuel with the expressions of the work of Obed-Edom to support Dowd so he could celebrate the arrival of the Ark of the Covenant. It's all prophetic of our time. And had it not been for the belligerence of this mother goddess cult, I would never have gone there with that expectation and been so illuminated and enlightened by Yahweh's testimony so that I could share it with you and you might understand the mindset of God as never before. So it has turned out to be something that was necessary. We must know that as it relates to God, we can be assured that Yahweh saw in Dowd these exemplary attributes and characteristics before he chose to engage with him. He realized that he was Koach Rab, to the greatest extent possible, a man of great strength. He saw something special in this man that he would claim as his son. Not just competency, but the confidence and the conviction, the courage and character to go to hell for a heavenly cause. Would you do that? He did. And may I ask, after all but two of those investigating the promised land, as portrayed in Numbers 13 and 14, all but two of them were humbled. They cowered in the sight of ordinary men. They imagined giants. They were so meek. If God was looking for meek or humbled, why did God preclude entry to the meek if being timid was a desirable trait? Why were there two bold men who were courageous and confident in Yahweh's presence allowed entry, while the mealy-mouthed and weak-kneed were not just excluded, but exterminated? All of those who were meek and timid and too humble were exterminated. God had such disdain for them. Presented another way, those who are confident in their relationship with Yahweh and who actually know him never bow before him. We never worship him. We have no fear of him. We never cower in his presence. And yet, we understand better than anyone how much smarter, wiser, and greater Yahweh is than we are, which is why we're so respectful of him and reliant upon him. And this leads us to the realization of what Yahweh values in men. We know that when we offer it, God can use us. Moshe, Dowd, and Elia exemplify this attitude to the greatest extent possible. And I'd like to throw in an attaboy for Yasha, Isaiah too. Now, perhaps this will help. In the manner to reveal the way to receive the benefits of the relationship, I existed with Moshe. I will be with you. I will not fail you or withdraw from you, and I will not abandon you or neglect you. This is Yasha, as in Joshua 1:5. Choose to be strong, to be tough and empowered, chazak, firm and resolute, and you will prevail. And be steadfast and courageous, bold, amatz, and you will cause these people to possess the inheritance of this land, which I promised to their fathers to give to them. Yasha, liberates and saves Joshua 1:6. Any questions? This mission is to bring Yisrael and Yehudim back to Yahweh, so that they recognize that Dowd was not only the Messiah, Son of God, the former and returning King, but our Savior. And in so doing, this remnant that survives the time of Israel's troubles will inherit the land and the earth. That is the mission, and it cannot be achieved without being strong, tough, confident, empowered, and resilient. You have to be steadfast and courageous for Yisrael and Yehudim to benefit. Keep in mind, you're speaking against everyone. God's message is so unpopular that it is an opposition to 2.5 billion Christians, 2 billion Muslims, a billion Marxists, close to a billion right-wing wackos like the MAGAs in America, over a billion people who are anti-Semitic and conspiratorial. This is a message that will only resonate with 1 in a million. Can you imagine going out there in social media and projecting this message openly, boldly, knowing that all but 1 in a million are not only going to reject you, they're going to demean you. They're going to slander you. They're going to attack you. Hell, even the goddamn AIs will say, oh, he is defining his own words. That sounds like that Craig Winn guy. And, you know, the scholars, he's not a scholar, and the scholars disagree with him. Put your finger up, check Wikipedia, and say, yeah, the majority of scholars support Christianity. It doesn't matter that it's a lie. It doesn't matter that it's impossible that it could be true. God isn't a man, and men cannot kill God, for starters. And Paul misquotes God every time he cites him. And Paul even admits that he's demon-possessed. But, you know, the AI, we don't think. Can you imagine? You're in opposition to all of the AI for that reason. You're in opposition to every anti-Semite. Look how popular the anti-Semites. Look at Candace Owens now has got the #1 influence designation in the world. Look at Tucker Carlson, demon-possessed and anti-Semitic to the hilt. Millions and millions of followers. We have entered a time when being anti-Semitic, being religious, being political, even with a president who is a pedophile and a consummate liar, vicious, confabulator. And they all have audiences. This job has none. When God chose someone to do this job, he had to pick the personality of a bull because no one else would prevail. As I survey what we have just considered, I'm reminded that Yahweh has chosen very few men through whom to convey his message and to carry out his plans. Even with an enormous divine assist, there are fewer than 1 in a billion who are willing to endure the aggravation and anguish that comes with representing Yahweh in an unreceptive world, prone to attack and to jeer his witnesses because they all speak against the most popular religious claims and political positions. The reason that there are so few is because what these men endure is particularly arduous. The mission requires devotion and fortitude because they play out over many decades and they typically consume every waking moment along the way. The scope is typically overwhelming, bringing even the most Gabor to despair at times because the responsibilities are enormous. They're unrelenting. Religions must be impugned to most everyone's chagrin. Politics have to be repudiated to the great consternation of the masses. Conspiracies, the fastest growing belief system in the world, must be rebuked, and naysayers thrust down and dismissed. Even more, in several cases, particularly with the ram and the bull, the job includes a horrifically painful sacrifice on behalf of people who have been even belligerent up to this point. The worst of the worst that must be endured by God's chosen implements are the insider attacks. Moses' life was filled with them. When he risked his own life to protect his kin, they turned on him, and they threatened him rather than thanking him. Throughout the Exodus, his brother and his sister attacked him and tried to speak over him. He was constantly abused and seldom appreciated during the 40 years that he spoke for God, and he tried to lead his people home. They would rather have stoned him. Dowd survived threats from every direction, beginning with his people's choice of king. Shaul's popularity positioned him to make Dowd's life miserable, as he made bringing Dowd down and destroying him his life's ambition, while twisting the Torah to serve his purpose. Dowd's wife, Michal, as we have discussed and shall soon see, was relentless in trying to disparage Yahweh's chosen implement. And then we have the ultimate in fractured family upheavals, when Dowd's son, Absalom, turned against him and led an eternal insurrection against the Messiah, Son of God and King. I, of course, would endure mine. Not once, but twice, even if the malcontent cast of deplorable characters arose out of the same conspiracy. Initially, the antagonistic conspiracy cult called themselves Unpopular Truth. They're still around, still political. And they would reconvene a decade later as the Mother Goddess cult, as they pretended to speak for a non-existent spirit mother. But then they began to busy themselves with slandering and disparaging me. All perhaps that is the reason that we now read, those who would jump abruptly about, leaping from one thing to another, akin to a bird, are deceptive and misleading. They are self-serving liars without any justification, providing a vain and false sense of security, pretending to help and save while screaming, crying, and shouting, even with the group's impressive ability to twist and to dance about. It can't save, can't even escape, nor spare itself from the ensuing harm. It cannot so much as deliver a single child. Mizmowr Song 33:17. Do not make the mistake of believing for a moment that Dowd, as king of Yisrael and soon to be king of the universe, and his father who was inspiring him, the creator God of this universe, would stoop to the level of exposing someone as ridiculous, as self-serving, as psychotic, as the founder of this mother goddess cult that is living their lives for no other purpose than to assail me. Because they have, and I will explain why. Now, we can come to this conclusion for a number of reasons, but lead among them is that there are two main Facebook sites. Rather than being an expression, teaching people how to explore and examine the Torah and sharing insights about God is closed. Invitation only. They're just too busy yibber-rabbering about things that make them feel good so that they can condemn me to even have it open for review. Private site. You know how many private sites I've had over my lifetime? 0. If I learn something from God, I share it, and share it openly, freely, and immediately. And on there, we hate Craig, even though everything they know that can be understood came from me, and everything they believe came from the malignant mother goddess. That is their fixation. One day after another, posting lies that somehow make them feel better about themselves. Now, why? Why would you ask? That God would besmirch them, that God would say they're not capable of saving anyone, that they're nothing but self-serving liars without any justification, providing a false sense of security, pretending you're all covenant, you're all going to be part of the harvest, you're all going to be saved. Hey, Craig, he's crazy when he says that you're no longer part of the covenant, that the best you could hope is your soul will cease to exist. How dare he say that? Well, that's what God is saying here, isn't it? Why would he do so? Because we have gone 2,500 years, approaching the very terminus of life as we know it, without anyone knowing Yahweh's name, without anyone recognizing the achievements of his beloved Son, our Savior, without anyone having any idea that there were 5 conditions and 5 benefits of the covenant, or that the Moed Mikra enable those benefits, or that Dowd fulfilled the first 3 of them, that his Bashar will fulfill the next 2, that make it possible for Dowd to return as king on Kippurim, and that the earth will be returned to the conditions of Eden on Sukkah. None of this was known. It is all essential. And so you finally have someone after 2,500 years that has the fortitude to do the study, to share the information, and to make these intelligent deductions about who God is, what he's offering, and what he expects in return. Finally, Yahweh's name is reintroduced to his people. Finally, Dowd's dignity is restored. And then you have this mean-spirited, malignant mother goddess cult trying to tear all that down with no time remaining for any other opportunity to prevail. This is the last and final hope for Yisrael, for Yehudim, for anyone who wants to know God. And they are doing everything they can, no matter how foolishly, to tear it down, while at the same time telling one another, oh, you're just fine. You can scream, you can cry, you can shout all you want. You can be just another bird brain out there leaping from one thing to another. You can be deceptive, you can be misleading. It's all going to be just fine for you. Oh, no. No, it won't. You've condemned your own soul. The very best you can hope for at this point is that your soul dissipates into nothingness. And for many, many, many of you, it's going to be far worse than that. You picked a fight with the wrong person at the wrong time for the wrong reason. Even with the group's impressive ability to twist and to dance about, it cannot save, it cannot escape, nor spare itself from harm. Mizmowr song, Psalm 33:17. Dowd in particular is focused on this mission, on books such as Coming Home, particular this series, but also in books like this that explain what's going to happen over the next 7 years, leading to his return. All because without them, the remaining Moed Mikra are not fulfilled. Dowd does not come back. The earth is not restored to Eden. Becomes a lifeless place. Dowd has so much writing on this. The man who endured Pesach, Matsah, and Bikurim, so that we might live and be part of God's family, recognizes that if it was not for our collaboration, it would be all for naught, because no one recognized what he had done. No one. And so they're focused on protecting this message against all who would attack it. And they are exceedingly devoted to providing all credibility that they can possibly muster. And we're talking about God and his beloved Son, the King of the universe, for this man and his collaboration with them. From one moment to the next, and without exception, every member of this mother goddess cult that is now the insiders who have become so embittered, well, they went from learning from me and agreeing with me until the moment a clinically diagnosed psychopath decided to jump abruptly to a life of lying and disparagement. She and her initial followers all went from being the most insistent that everything I was learning from Yahowah and openly sharing with them was right to wholesale deception, claiming to speak on behalf of a non-existent spirit mom. The woman who claimed that she was a bird in the Torah and thus written into God's story became an entirely self-serving, vainly twisted malcontent while pretending to help those whose souls she was destroying, as is the case with every psychopath. She told those that she had openly disparaged that she was supporting them. And then she told all of those that I had openly supported that I had criticized them. And they believed her, showing no judgment or discernment whatsoever. She claimed that she could assure their salvation. Don't worry. We'll speak for Mommy God. She will save us. Shabuah will be our harvest. No. They forfeited any assurance of salvation. Far worse, with their vitriol, with each and every word, they increased the likelihood that they will end up in Sheol. Not my doing, theirs. It is evident that Yahowah is aware of them and that he despises them. Now, I can't speak for Spirit Mom. She might love them. If they could only find one that was real, that might be beneficial to them. But we have witnessed scores of prophecies like this one, warning the world about them. Scream and cry as they may, the mommy goddess cult is at the very best, a death sentence to the participants. And they may impress themselves with their irrational rantings, but no one who succumbs will be spared of their harm. So saith God. Dowd's next observation is consistent with everything we have come to know about Yahowah, and it is why I interpreted the previous statements in a manner which reflect his sentiment. God respects those who respect him. His focus is on those who persist and endure, accomplishing what he once achieved. It is our unfaltering love and steadfast devotion to our Father that draws his attention to us. As a result, these are the souls Yahowah spares from the indignity of death. Even in a world starving for a lack of knowing, there are those God has promised to keep nourished forevermore. Behold, the vision of Yahowah is on those who respect him, on those who resolutely persist and endure. Because of their unfaltering love and devotion, rescuing, delivering, and saving their soul from death and keeping it alive, even as others starve. Mizmowr, Psalm 33:19. God is no fool, and he isn't a masochist. So he loves those who respect him and appreciate him. After all, there are very few things more annoying than unrequited love. It's to be avoided, as are those who fail to return God's kindness and affection. Most of us, particularly in our youth, have experienced unrequited love, have we not? Some boy or girl out there, man or woman, that superficially, at least, we thought was going to be our perfect match, and that they should be ours, and they thought otherwise. And it is a giant hole, a sense of vacuum, when our fascination with them is unreciprocated. There's no reason for God to endure that. It would make him less than who he is. But more than this, to be included in Yahweh's covenant family, we are expected to contribute. Working together is not only a way to show our appreciation, it pays dividends. It enriches our lives and the lives of others. And so while most remain inadequately nourished for a lack of effort, those of us who till the soil for this harvest that God intends, we live very long and fulfilling lives. Now, there are only two men whose bodies will be pierced on behalf of the covenant, Dowd and Yasha. But we can all open up our souls to God such that he can cut us into the relationship. And we make ourselves available to him by accepting the prescriptions he engraved for our benefit. And they're presented throughout the Torah. Our lives become more productive when we are receptive to the idea of God helping us achieve a worthy result. You know, Yahweh is a great supporter of vibrant collaboration, especially when his co-worker contributes as much as is humanly possible. The weaker the man, the less the partnership. And while it's only natural that God would want to protect his co-workers, especially with so few of them, they must endure hardship to develop the requisite backbone to stand up under such unrelenting pressure. And yet, through all of the abuse, those who engage with Yah are automatically enrolled, in the ultimate life assurance policy. Wow, there are cables on these computers, and we now have Qara and Wookiee chasing each other across the studio, and they are just certain that they're going to tear this place down. So we will do our best to pursue this testimony just a bit longer before we realize that we have been outmatched by the exuberance of the puppies. So now that we are aware that God has enrolled those who are bold enough to engage with him with the ultimate life assurance policy, let's consider what more our Messiah and King had to say. He said, our soul and consciousness, our nephesh, long to be pierced and to cut us into the engraved prescriptions for living, chukah, to approach Yahweh, who is our helper and our protector. Isn't that amazing? So for those of us who know Yahweh, our souls, which is the part of us that is observant of our environment and can respond to it. That's the difference between plants and animals. Animals have souls, which enable them to witness what's happening around them, to experience it, and then to respond in an appropriate manner. So our souls and consciousness long to be pierced, to cut us in to the engraved prescriptions for living, to approach Yahweh, who serves as our helper, our assistant, and our protector is he. Dowd was, of course, pierced fulfilling Pesach, and Yada will endure the same on Teruah as the Adamah Parah. It is a gift willingly offered because the sacrifice is used by Yahweh to cut many into the covenant by way of the engraved prescriptions for living, which permeate his Torah. In this way, those harvested and gleaned, as well as those purged of their guilt, are able to approach Yahweh. Reaffirming what he has stated previously, those who work with Yah are supported by him. God helps those who help him accomplish what he wants done. It's as it should be. Reaffirming what he has stated previously, we need to have a complete appreciation of God's desire as it relates to humankind. He wants us to engage with him, and those who do, God supports. Now, our time spent alone with God, listening to him, is always joyous. It's fulfilling. Publicly, however, this is a different story. When we are exposed to millions of embittered malcontents promoting religion, politics, or conspiracy, the experience is challenging to the point it can be exasperating. It is so bad, the two most formidable souls in God's cast of characters, Moshe and Dowd, they both buckled under the pressure and completed their initial lives just simply going through the motions. It took too much out of them. Many were vicious. They were condescending for far too long. And so while confidence is the catalyst of success, insider abuse is the most debilitating of all plagues. This is why it's so serious. It's why Dowd and Yahweh are so active in confronting it. Look what Yahweh did when Miriam tried to insist that she also spoke for Yahweh after denouncing Moshe's wife. I mean, he not only came to support Moshe, saying that he was the one he had chosen and appointed, and explained exactly how we know that God chose Moshe and that he didn't choose anyone else at that time. He struck Miriam with leprosy. He said, it's as if your father spit in your face. He ostracized her from the community. God took this very, very seriously. Now, it's true. One-on-one, our Father is always a pleasure to work around. He is the perfect parent, conversationalist, teacher, boss, and friend. But as people, not so much. Nevertheless, because he is so charming and compassionate, we are willing to endure the stripes so often absorbed when speaking on his behalf, particularly when trying to reconcile the relationship that has been fractured as a result of his belligerent children. Indeed, in him, our mind and heart rejoice and are elated, because in his set apart and unique name, this is the larger, obviously, of the two. He would love to have my iced tea now, but has not learned how to drink it out of a bottle. So indeed, in him, Our mind and heart rejoice and are elated because his set apart and unique name in it we trust and rely. Bashak 33:21. Yes, indeed. In Yahweh, our mind, our heart, our thinking, our inclinations rejoice. We express outward joy. Our attitude is elevated. And this is because in his name, which we know to be set apart and unique, we trust and rely. We are confident and we depend. There is no disunity between confidence and reliance. The more reliant, the more confident. And when both reach their maximum potential, success is assured. With Yahweh, relationships begin with his name and quickly migrate to the point that we love him and we respect it. Yahweh's name is a source of joy and of pride. And knowing, loving, and using it is simply the first of many strides we take when we want to end up ultimately enveloped in his arms. Recognizing that Yahweh chose us and that he is steadfastly devoted to those of us who respect him. Isn't it appropriate for us to return both favors? Yahweh has chosen to always be steadfastly loving and eternally devoted to you. It is for us in a manner consistent with the way to receive the benefits of the relationship, the means to endure and persist by approaching you. Yes, indeed. Yahweh has chosen to be steadfastly loving. He's eternally devoted to us. So isn't it appropriate for us in a manner consistent with the way that he has presented the means to receive the benefits of this relationship, to endure and to persist by approaching him? And that Yahweh wants to be with us, and that he has devoted himself to our well-being. The only thing keeping us apart really is our attitude towards him. Therefore, when we acknowledge and accept the means to receive the benefits of the relationship with him, we are assured of living in his presence and of receiving the benefits, as has been our custom throughout this Coming Home series now, that we have completed the 33rd Mizmowr. I'm going to present the whole of it. Here is the king's narration without interruption. Those who are correct have chosen to overcome by singing and shouting joyously. With Yahweh, the approach is straightforward and upright. It is appropriate and fitting. It is laudable and excellent. Choose to express your appreciation, conveying what you know, while extending your hand. For Yahweh, with a harp or lyre, along with 10-stringed instruments, play an uplifting song to him. Of your own free will, sing a restoring and reaffirming song to him. Choose to do so cheerfully, performing appropriately while playing instruments, especially during Teruah, as the herald sounds the trumpet. Indeed, the word of Yahweh is straightforward and right, and all of his work is trustworthy and reliable. He demonstrably loves those who are right. Therefore, the good judgment, loving benefits, and favors of Yahweh will fill the earth. By the word of Yahweh, the universe and spiritual realms were made, and by the spirit of his mouth and resulting speech, all of their host. He gathers as a barrier the waters of the sea. He offers to provide an inexhaustible source of water within the treasured storehouse. He establishes and positions the water, causing them to stand up in a supernatural manner. Something you'll witness on Teruah, should you be there. Out of reverence, respect, and admiration for Yahweh, all of the earth, every inhabitant of this world will choose to either conspire to incite a rebellion against him for fear of him, or they will profoundly respect and genuinely revere the foreigner who is dwelling among them. Your choice. This is the reason he spoke of him. And he came to be. It's why he instructed him. And he was present, appointed, and standing. Yahweh negates and crushes the revolting schemes and defiant plans of the Gentiles. He discourages and forbids, even frustrates and restrains the musings, the inventions and opinions of the people. The advice and counsel of Yahweh is presented and stands forever. The purpose and plans of his heart and mind are for all places, times, and for the generations to come. For the benefit of the relationship, Hagoi, this non-Yisraelite, will reveal the way to get the most out of life. His God is Yahweh. His God is Yahweh. He has chosen and desires the family and these people as his inheritance. For himself as his assignment. From the spiritual realms of the heavens, Yahweh is perceptive and observant. He sees what pertains to the entirety of the offspring of this man. Out of the place to ponder what has been firmly established, from his dwelling place, he looks intently upon all of those inhabiting the land. He's the one who fashioned and formed their heart and their mind to be together at the same time, united and joined as one. He is the one who makes the connections to understand something about their every endeavor. Did not the king prevail and deliver salvation through tremendous strength and an abundance of power, showing the ability to endure the anguishing travail? This mighty, courageous, and capable man with tremendous confidence, yet even he does not deliver salvation, nor is he spared and drawn out by his own very considerable qualifications, capabilities, or strength, even his steadfast devotion. Those who jump abruptly about, leaping from one thing to another like a bird, are deceptive, they're misleading, and they are self-serving liars without any justification, providing a vain and false sense of security, pretending to help and to save, while screaming and crying and shouting, even with the group's impressive ability to twist and to dance about. It can't escape, nor can it spare itself or any child from harm. Behold, the vision of Yahweh is upon those who respect him, those who resolutely persist and endure because of their unfailing love and devotion, rescuing, delivering, and saving their soul from death and keeping them alive as others are malnutritioned. Our soul and our consciousness, they long to be pierced to cut us into the engraved prescriptions for living, to approach Yahweh, who is our helper and our protector. Indeed, in him our mind and heart rejoice and are elated, because in his set apart and unique name, we trust and rely. We are confident and depend. Yahweh has chosen to always be steadfastly loving and eternally devoted to you. So it is for us, in like manner, consistent with the way to receive the benefits of the relationship, to endure and persist by approaching you. Thank you so much for this time and for being part of this enterprise devoted to the elucidation of the most important realizations ever processed in the minds and hearts of men.
And we're out.